We're at the LA Art Box on Melrose Avenue. Well, this was an idea through a discussion that I had with my son. He didn't feel quite connected with our background, our being Filipino. I traveled, got promoted, and he didn't actually grow up with a lot of people that looked like him. So it made me think, like, how many other kids feel this way? Yeah.
So your son, is he Filipino, full Filipino?
Yeah, he's full Filipino.
But born and raised in the States?
Born and raised in the States, and I took him out of the Bay Area, which just has a really great Filipino community. But at 3 years old, we moved to the Pacific Northwest. I moved him again. I moved him 4 times before he graduated from high school. And predominantly in not like ethnic neighborhoods, unfortunately, but in a great way. He learned to assimilate and get very confident. However, I think there's a little bit part of him that feels a little disconnected about that face in the mirror that he sees, because he didn't see a lot of that as he was growing up.
And I love that here you are, you know, the love of a mom is really incomparable, right?
Mm-hmm.
Here you are trying to fill that gap in him. And it's good that you have that open communication with him. What about you, your immigration story? Tell us about that.
Oh, my immigration story? I immigrated to the United States around 7. My father had been in the US 3 years before us. And we arrived around 1978, I believe, in Oakland, California. And I just saw my parents, they were successful, they had great careers in the Philippines, but it was a little bit of an adjustment being the US. My dad was a security guard, he worked graveyard shifts, my mom was a nurse, she had to change her career, didn't have certifications here. So I saw the struggle, and I saw how hard they worked to make sure that we were provided and grew up with an American dream that they had always envisioned for all of us.
And that's what our community is about, right? Immigration.
Absolutely.
And representation.
Absolutely.
Right? Whether you're born and raised here, whether you're second, third, fourth generation Filipino-Americans, you have an immigration story, because it's not just your story, it's the story of the people that came before you.
Absolutely.
Right?
It's my parents' story, it's my grandmother's story, it's all of us.
What was it like as a 7-year-old kid moving to a foreign land?
Well, one, you come to the States, you had a little bit of luxuries in the Philippines.
Yes.
You had a yaya, somebody took care of you, somebody washed your clothes. My mom was always a working mom. So it's this big adjustment of like, oh wow, we have to cook, nobody's watching me after school, that kind of thing. But in many ways, I admire that we kind of moved away from this life of not experiencing life, and it made us resilient. It made me very resilient as a young adult.
What about growing up in communities where you were in? How is it the same or different from the experience of your son?
Oh my gosh. Well, luckily, as all Northern California young adults, you know, there's so many pockets of really strong Filipino communities. So I winded up moving from Oakland to Daly City, which is probably has the largest concentration, along with Vallejo, of Filipino-Americans. So I felt very connected. There was like restaurants, my aunts and uncle lived like a couple blocks away. So from a familiar story, we were always surrounded by family in our community. My sons, however, were not, you know, predominantly Caucasian neighborhoods. Florida was a big adjustment for them. And my intent was to really provide them and move them to great communities, great schools. However, there was a little bit of lack of representation. And sometimes when you're trying to find your community, you feel just at home right away when you see people that look like you.
Why LA then? Why did you choose LA to be the home of LA Art Box?
Looking it up, it's basically simple. Outside of the Philippines, Los Angeles has the highest concentration of Filipinos, and plain and simple. So if we can break through with our storytelling here, then it's just as easy to transition to cities like San Francisco. But yeah, again, representation is important, and opening up on Melrose is important as well, because then we have people that could hear our story.
That are not just Filipinos.
That are not just Filipino. We have lovely people walking by here asking us who we are, where are you from, what's this gallery about? And again, we're telling our stories to everybody, and I am not surprised. I'm actually very proud to see that this particular community outside here on Melrose is really welcoming to us.
I can see the pride in your eyes and the joy in the way you smile, the way you tell your stories. It feels like you've come home.
It's a passion project. It's a place that we are so proud of. We want it to be a space for basically people from communities of color, creative, especially film creatives. There's not much of us. And we wanted to be a place, a destination where we can tell stories.
I love that. Destination where we can tell stories, destination where we can gather.
Correct.
Right?
Yeah.
And a destination where we can represent each other.
Absolutely.
Right? And represent our dreams as a community. But I know that it wasn't easy. What kind of struggles did you have to overcome in order to start LA Art Box?
Well, opening up in the middle of the pandemic, for one, just getting financial backing, getting the outreach, networking a lot, with everyone quarantining, it's very hard to meet people. And then moving from a corporate to a creative life, made everyone, my near and dears, like a little skeptical about what I'm doing. But I'm glad we persevered, and I'm glad we made connections here. The kindness of strangers is what Mar and I have been saying. We've been so welcome with the Fil-Am community, most of which we didn't know until we arrived here in September. And we're forever thankful for having them introduce us to new people like you.
Yes. How old is this place now?
We opened October 3rd, so only honestly 4 months.
What have you had so far in this place?
Jeffrey's exhibit is our second exhibit. It was a surprise to have such an acclaimed Filipino-American artist want to show in our space. Our first exhibit was called Luminaria. It's something that we wanted to show diversity, inclusivity, and storytell what lights meant to different cultures. Our next one after Jeffrey is the one that I'm so excited for. It's called Katatubo. It's our homage to our Filipino culture, and it's storytelling about the indigenous people in the Philippines that are living, thriving, and they just want to know that they're there and they're part of who we are, and it's so rich, and I think it's important that our kids know their story.
And speaking of kids, tying it back to how it started, what does your son tell you now? How did he react to LA Art Box?
Well, I was excited. He was here for the premiere. He even got interviewed. I was laughing because he was like, this is my mom's idea. I'm just so impressed. I couldn't believe she could make it happen. But he is so, so, so proud of me. And he's so proud of what we're doing here in Los Angeles. I would love every Filipino-American, young and old, to come see this place, to know that our space can be your space, to make this a gathering place for Filipino-Americans and honestly, all communities, and also the AAPI community. Come visit us.